We are going to be 10 billion by 2050. We are going to live on a planet 4 degrees hotter. We are going to have more mouths and less food. We are going to have less land and more pollution. But we crossed oceans and we defeated diseases. But we went to the moon and we blossomed the desert. Because we are innovators. We are farmers. We are makers. We are dreamers. And we are going to gather and discuss, create and inspire minds and souls. Because we are feeding our future.
Good morning, everyone. As we progress through the 21st century, individuals and the division between us are starting to prevail, actually stopping the progression of our shared communities. What we fail to acknowledge, and this is our biggest mistake, is that the world isn't composed of every single one of us doing what they do by themselves, but the ways in which they share ideas and collaborate in order to achieve common goals. This becomes crucial in the development of a smart grid, interfacing the local and the global, interfacing producers and consumers, and most importantly, working towards the sustainable development of our world. Food today is as important as ever, granting us the possibility of living and of participating in bringing our world further. This is why our current approach of dealing within the food system through the use of continuously straining our land does not become sustainable anymore. A smart grid based on big data, artificial intelligence, and models shared between the communities becomes fundamental in our sustainable development. Today, I am eager to learn about this new and innovative concept regarding the links within our food system, and I hope that you are too. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Guido Romeo. I'm a journalist for Il Sole 24 Ore, and I'll be facilitating the talks this morning. So it's really an honor and a privilege to be here with you, and also to be introducing such an important panel. They've been working for the last 4 days in a big foresight exercise. You will discover what that means. We have a lot of difficult words this morning. Smart grid is not the only one. We will also discover what smart grids are in much more detail. There is some technology, but it's not all about technology. In fact, there's much more than technology. So I would like to invite my guests here and my speakers. Please, Cecilia Bartolucci, can you join us? Cecilia has been the leader of the Foresight exercise. Welcome, Cecilia, please. Cecilia is with CNR. She's the coordinator of the Foresight exercise, and she will tell us exactly what smart grids are. Richard Kennedy from the US, Director of Neutral Science and also founder. Thank you, Richard. Nilofer Azan from the US. She's the lead of the Precision Urban Agriculture. Thank you. At the Institute for Transfer Technologies. And we're going to Senegal now with Ndella. She's a program assistant for the Italian Agency for Development in Dakar. Welcome, Ndella. And we're back to Italy with Francesco Montesano, researcher at ISPA, which is an institute from CNR. Thank you, Francesco. Mauro Cardioli is with us. He's R&D manager for Izita Lab. I hope I pronounced that correctly. That's a startup in Padua, but also in Salinas in California. Marie Connett from the US, director of the global development from Intellectual Ventures, will be with us connected through Skype. So I will introduce her again later. Madi Utama is with us here from Bali, from Indonesia. He's doing excellent work on basically treating Bali not as a tourist place, but as a lab for climate change techniques. And last but not least, Natalia Palacios from Mexico, who's working in Mexico and elsewhere on corn and maize. So welcome everybody. Really happy to have you here. Cecilia, the floor is yours. What are smart grids? That's my only question. It should be on.
Okay. Yeah, well, what is SmartGrid? First of all, let me just quickly say that, the SmartGrid concept came out of an exercise done by the Foresight Group of the National Research Council of Italy. And what are we trying to do? What is the goal? The goal is to try to address challenges, societal challenges such as health, such as food security, sustainability, energy, water, and we're trying to come together with an international groups of experts and try to decide on the priorities to address those challenges and changes, long-term changes that we want to undertake, and also try to find priorities for research, for innovation, for development of new technologies. And out of this work in the past 2 years sprung this concept of smart grid. And during the last days, as Guido was mentioning, we got together in Capri and we tried to figure out whether this concept is feasible or not. And why are we trying to propose a different system? Nowadays, we are able to produce enough food to nourish all the population on Earth. But nonetheless, we have hunger, we have micronutrient deficiencies, we have obesity and overweight, which is part of malnutrition. And most of the people who are actually poor are the ones who work on the fields. Furthermore, we know that agriculture is responsible for a big percentage of greenhouse gas emission, of water withdrawal, and of soil degradation. So there is clearly something wrong in our current system, food system, and we need to change something about it. So when we're talking about a food system, what really are we talking about? Everybody knows what a food chain is. A food chain is fairly simple, straightforward, linear, and we use it to describe, for example, the food chain of vegetables production, the food chain of milk production, and so on. But a food system, just if you look at this picture, is way far more complicated. A food system, on the contrary of a food chain, also wants to depict and wants to take into account the interaction between the production, the distribution, the consumption of food with all the other systems that it interacts with. So all the inputs and outputs are somehow taken into account. So we have a social system, we have a political system, economic system, biological system, the environment, everything needs to be taken into account and somehow is interacted with this food system. Now, if we overimpose the food chain over the system, you see that a food system, when you consider a food system, you introduce many, many more dimensions, and this arises in a dynamic system. So there aren't only more dimensions, but there is also a very, very dynamic system which we have to take into account. So what we are proposing with our smart grid is to connect all the different food systems somehow to connect them together and make sure that in such a way we come up with a system that is more sustainable and provides more food. At the center of each of the food systems, there are the societal needs. So if you see it, here at the centers are depicted all the little humans, because that is what we start from. And in every food system, there are food chains. And the food chains are embedded in this food system. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to see what do we need to connect them, and why do we do that? We do that because we believe that if you want to have a sustainable food system, and if you want to make sure that everybody has food security, you need to follow certain criteria. And one of the criteria that this food system wants to support is that we want to match supply and variety to the needs. And when we talk about needs, we talk about nutritional needs, societal needs, economical needs, environmental needs. And those needs to be matched. That brings in a completely new concept, which is the concept of quality against quantity. So we are trying to provide quality food, nutritional quality food, food that provides quality to the people who are farming it, who are producing and selling it, and not only quantity. We want to optimize resources. Only if we optimize resources, we're going to be able to work in a sustainable way. How do we do that? We do that through monitoring, through evaluating, through connecting the capacities, to predicting. And this we do to adapting both the technologies that we already have and by developing new technologies that allow us to collect data. And this data needs not only to be connected, but they need to be analyzed and they need to be responsive. So this system has to be adaptable to all different situations. We don't want it only for developed countries, but also for developing countries. The tools that we provide to access this information we want to make decision on needs to be adapted to different levels of instruction, to different situations. So an adaptable system that is going to be responsive, and only like that we think that in the future we'll be able to have a sustainable system. So the last picture that I want to show you is just to tell you that in Capri, when we got together, we proposed some case studies. These case studies, which come from all over the world, and here my colleagues will introduce them to you, are case studies to see if the system is actually doable. And where do we start? Where are the starting points? They are completely different systems, completely different levels that they're going to portray. The only thing that they have together is different challenges, which we believe can be affected and can have benefits if they are connected to a smart grid.
Thank you, Cecilia. I guess the question here is, well, there are two questions actually. One is, what is a foresight? Because that's the other difficult word, and maybe not everybody gets it. It's an exercise of vision and of merging of visions. And the other question is, how much technology is there? Is it all technology, or is it a lot of social innovation? Because you're working with countries where, I mean, the price of technology has to rival with the price of labor, which is really, really low. So it's a hard bet sometimes.
Okay, so the first question, what is a foresight? With a foresight, we don't try to predict the future. We're trying to get people together and try to see, you know, what would we like our future to be? And how can we know that there are challenges that we're going to face. How can we, from now on, backtracking, imagining what is the future that we want to have? And how can we start from today addressing this future? And we provide a vision. So the Foresight project is actually, and the grid is actually a vision. We think that we will be able not to have a grid within the next 5 years. It's going to take 20 years. It's going to take a change of paradigm. It's going to take people really to change their way of thinking and adapting. And we can do that only if we not only address technologies, as you were saying, but also if we get everybody involved and apply learning systems and social innovation. So it is amazingly important that it is clear that this concept does rely on technology, does rely on platforms, does rely on data gathering, data connection, data analysis, but it also does require that we develop tools and we develop a way to co-design this process with the people, to involve them from the beginning. There is no point in introducing innovation, particularly in certain countries, if they don't feel part of it. So this whole system and this grid wants also to connect all this kind of knowledge, all this kind of social innovation.
Okay, well, you have a point there. Richard, that's on to you because you're one of the tech guys here, and you were telling me earlier that you want to make this sustainable, so it's pretty high bet there.
Thanks very much. So it's my task to take us into one of the first case studies that we talked about at the workshop in Capri last week. And the case study is on urban food systems, urban smart grid food systems. The concept is that we want to take this more generalized concept and take it down into the urban system. So what is the problem? What is the challenge? What is the opportunity that we've identified? The problem is, the challenge, the opportunity, if you want to think of it that way, is that we have tremendous technology, tremendous knowledge, tremendous capacity to produce food, to deliver food, but at the same time, we have tens of millions who are food insecure in our cities. That shouldn't be. We shouldn't have that much of a differential. We think of that as an opportunity. We think of that as a way to start developing and implementing technology into places where it is most needed. If you look at the things that are called food deserts in some of our most progressive cities, this slide shows Boston and the San Francisco-Oakland area. Food deserts are identified as places where low income and access to fresh foods create a situation where it's very difficult to get fresh foods for families, right? These food deserts exist in many places, not just in urban environments. However, the urban environments provide a place where we can identify gaps between producers and consumers, places where producers don't understand where consumers' needs are, how to protect them, how to address them, identify those gaps, and alleviate some of this malnutrition and some of this places where there are difficulty in getting food to the right places at the right time. So there's lots of people that are trying to fill these gaps already. And that's the point of trying to create marketplaces and trying to find ways to address the challenges of these food deserts. People are out there right now trying to identify what it is that people need in order to satisfy their nutritional needs, when to get it to them, how to get it to them. There's people who are out there, innovators, that are trying to figure out ways to create new ways of growing food in places where it's currently not grown. IKEA is an example of places like that. There's other innovators out there in marketplaces like this, urban scenarios, where they're trying to find ways to deliver fresh food from the market, or rather from the farm directly to the consumer. There's people who are even out there trying to innovate in ways of correcting the waste that we have for food, to provide a better place, to provide a better way to address the food waste that we have right now. But in each of these examples, it's difficult to get to those places, get to those food deserts. It's difficult to find marketplaces, difficult to find incentive in order to get to the places where it's needed the most. There are people that are trying to do that. There are technologies and innovators that are trying to get the growing food to the places where it's needed the most. And in the following talk, Nilofer Hassan is going to talk about one of those efforts as part of the case studies. But these gap finding or these gap filling technologies have a difficult time getting to the markets where they're needed most, right? So the process that we're trying to undertake is to methodically, systematically look through where the producers are, where the needs are, where the supply chains are, where the breakdowns occur. We're doing that in a way that has an informatics, has an information sharing approach to it, has a new technology or systems analysis approach to it. We're doing it in a way to try to drive down the barrier of entry of some of these innovators, social innovation, technology innovation, knowledge sharing, so we can drive down the price of entry so we can get those innovators into the places where they're needed the most. So finding the gaps, finding where the markets are broken, is one of the goals of the SmartGrid approach, and particularly in urban environments, we think we can facilitate that. So the time is right to do this. So if you think 100 years ago, when we first started, in some ways of thinking, getting away from food locally grown and started getting to long chains of food production, we had much less technology, much less knowledge, much less ability to connect consumers to producers. But now we do, and in fact, in those places where there is the greatest need, there's paradoxically a lot of capacity, a lot of ability to do the work that's needed to produce the foods. Getting the innovation, getting the social innovation, the technology innovation into those hands, into those places, is something we can start to address if we start thinking about this systematically in a smart way, a smarter way. So building smarter food systems is not a simple task, and don't worry, I'm not going to go through all these words on this slide. The point is there's a research component to this, and there's a matchmaking or a low-hanging fruit component to this. We think that being able to find ways to connect producers to consumers more easily is is a methodical, is a process, is a learning environment kind of thing that we need to start engaging in. So think, for example, if we were able to bundle consumers' interests over the next 3 months within an area of higher need, if we were able to provide that information to producers locally, if we were able to provide that information to entrepreneurs locally and say, okay, we have this very specific need that we can predict. We can do this because of new technologies we have now. If we can do that, they can time their production and scale their production in ways that are much more efficient. We can create jobs. We can create opportunities. We can create places where innovation can alleviate some of this malnutrition, some of the harm that's out there. So we're taking a simple approach. One of the things we learned in the Anna Capri workshop is that boots on the ground are very important, and Cecilia just mentioned that. Having people out there who actually know the players in the field, having people out there that actually know where it is we can connect the dots, where we can provide entrepreneurs, innovators, social benefit organizations, the tools they need in order to get those producers to the consumers. We need to actually be in the community. So we're planning a series of collaboration events. Workshops is the wrong word. We're planning a series of events to get people together, to get the actual practitioners, those that are trying to do this, together with the actual people who need, together with the innovators, together with the technology. We need to be able to do this so we can identify those quick connections that will make a difference, but then also identify the research that we need to have done. We've begun assembling partners. We've begun assembling the way to do this. We have a lot of interest in working with you to do this. So my plea to you is actually, if you have an interest in this, join on. This is something we can do. There's a social good here. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Richard. Well, there's a couple of questions for you there too, I guess. One is, how do you see the role of the public hand? I mean, should you take up subsidies or get tax breaks, or when you say sustainable, how sustainable is all of this?
Well, that's a really critical question, because obviously continuing to throw money at the problem hasn't been working, right? So we need to find ways of facilitating marketplaces. So think of those food deserts and the margins around them. Places where there is a market for things are things we want to encourage, expand, and grow into the places where disadvantage occurs. So we want to be able to create an economically sustainable marketplace to drive forward. To do that, there's probably some infrastructure needs. Either data infrastructure, social infrastructure, technology, building a few greenhouses in places where they aren't right now. You know, there may be some need for that. But it's a facilitating of marketplace kind of thing, not a continual infusion of cash kind of thing. Driving the prices down, finding the entrepreneurs, connecting them to the need, that's the goal.
So it would be probably a tax break on the land you use for a greenhouse, or putting in a 4G.
That's a great idea. You should join us. That's a great idea. Seriously.
It's a journalist idea. We have lots of funny ideas, so I don't know if it works. No, the other simple question is, when we talk about grids, we always, I mean, I have this thing that I always think about big chunks of fiber optics, very costly, but I have an impression that it's more about mobile technology, so it's probably not the most expensive part of technology there.
It is, and actually, you know, one of the case studies that we considered early in the process was called the Grandmother Network. It's in, I forget which, it was Haiti? But in any case, I mean, there's actually, networks are social more than technological. I mean, even with the social benefits, or rather the technological benefits we have, in the end, it's the social network and the analysis of the social networks that's critical. That's a research need. But you don't have to have high technology in order to get the right things in the right places.
So
identifying the need is maybe a technological challenge, but getting it to work is more social and a cultural challenge.
So it's pretty much off-the-shelf technology, or things we already have, like smartphones.
I think the low-hanging fruit is off-the-shelf stuff right now.
No.
There's nanotechnology, there's information technology that can push us further. That can drive those boundaries between the affluent and the need, you know, further. But right now, there's a lot of room in the in-between, I think. Thanks.
Thank you. Nilofer, Richard was mentioning food deserts. That's really your area of expertise. So please show us some of the food deserts.
Surely, and I'm gonna start by going back to Cecilia's graphic and talking about where we fit within that larger picture. So our focus is really on, I changed the words here, on the link between local production and local needs. And we're really looking at the capacity to grow fresh vegetables in cities in a way that can meet the needs of food deserts. And it's based on this idea, A, that if we connect these two things here, we are both fulfilling a gap that exists in this existing system, because we know that fresh food is not getting to many of our inner city neighborhoods now. And that by doing so, and I'm just going to move our slide for a second and then maybe move back, by doing so, we also address just a tiny bit of this larger question of agriculture. That we know that agriculture as we know it, as Cecilia mentioned, has a lot of environmental costs. And so if we can figure out a way to do it in which we can reduce the burden, the water burden, the environmental burden, the burden of runoff, that these things, it's not going to solve the full problem because we're only talking about a limited basket of crops, but is part of the aggregate solution that we need to make agriculture more sustainable. And similarly, we're not going to totally solve the problem of food deserts because people need to eat a lot more than vegetables, but we can chip away at that problem too. So I'm going to go back for a second to who we are because it'll help you understand our approach and why we think we can do this. So this is a partnership between the Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratories. There are 19 national laboratories in the United States. They're funded by the federal government to do pure science. So they have a lot of scientific horsepower. At our national laboratory, we have material scientists. They're working on energy. They're working on energy efficiency. They're working on lighting. They're working on the uptake of nutrients by plants and how microbiome interacts with roots. And so we have the capacity to pull across lots of scientific expertise to develop new technologies and new approaches. Our organization, the Institute for Transformative Technology, was birthed at the lab. And the idea behind ITT is that there's all of this wonderful technology, but is it solving the problems of those at the bottom of the pyramid? And the idea is to do that, you don't just need a technological solution. You need a solution that has a business model behind it, that brings the cost down enough that it can be scalable and it can be sustainable. And hopefully you will hear those ideas in our presentation as we go through. So what we're particularly interested in this initiative is what we're calling precision urban agriculture. This is soilless growing, tight control of environmental conditions. So we're looking at controlling water, nutrients, lighting, temperature, carbon dioxide, so that we can create the optimal environment for plants. When this is done well, people can do this. They can grow in 1% of the water that is used for traditional growing. They can grow on 1% of the land. They can use 20% of the nutrients. They can produce without pesticides and without insecticides. So this is very clean, efficient, ecologically good growing. Sounds like nirvana, right? There are some issues. So first of all, you should know that this is not future science. This is science now. Bright Farms, Aero Farms, lots of people who are here right now. These are people who are already doing this. What we know, though, is that when the folks who are doing this right now are doing it, it's great. It has all of these environmental benefits. It's got large capital costs, and it has large running costs, and it uses a lot of energy. So energy, materials, et cetera. And what that means, the addition of all that means that what people are producing now are specialty crops for high-end markets at a price premium. The question we are asking ourselves, and I will tell you we do not have the answer to, but we can tell you where we think we need to go to get there, is can you create an economic model that would work so that these crops could be used to feed low-income populations within cities in urban food deserts. So I'm going to quickly go through the problems we think we need to solve to get there. So if you look above, let me see if I can look over here. First of all, clearly we need enhanced technology for controlled precision growing. Currently, lighting is about 40 to 45% of both the capital investment costs and the running costs of these systems. We know that the projections for LEDs are going to make them more efficient. We know there's a lot of really great work going on in the market. We think those can come down. We know that temperature management is an issue that needs to be solved, that disease and pest control needs to be solved, that we need to really get much more sensitive systems for nutrient calibration. So these are all things that are like, that there are scientists in our lab that we think that can articulate to these problems. We know that there is an issue of increased plant growth efficiency. That these systems work well for plants if they have a precise formula for how to make these plants grow optimally. And when you do it right, you can do them 50% faster, you can make them grow bigger, you can make them grow to particular nutrient profiles, but we need to develop those recipes for these plants. We know that we need to, that currently plants grow in symbiosis with microbiome in the soil, and that we haven't figured that out for these systems. And that we know that we need to develop new crops specifically for these environments. But you, Guido, said earlier that this is not just about the technological fixes. And we think that to get an economic model that will work in low-income communities, we also need co-location gains, so that we need to really rethink the packaging, transport, storage, and processing, so that we can use this idea, oh, I just blacked the screen, use this idea that we are co-located with our customers as a way to create economic efficiencies. Right now, lettuce, for example, which is most commonly grown in these systems, the farm price has not been over 30% of the consumer price in the last 30 years. So we think that there's a lot of gains on that back end that we could capitalize on. We want to look at this idea of how can we use the fact that we're in an urban community to get bioenergy, to look at secondary, this sort of gets to what you asked, Richard, which is the secondary gains. Are we producing jobs? Can we change health outcomes? Can we create educational opportunities? Because there are funding streams connected to all of those social goods that we think could articulate to our systems. And then we really need to figure out the sustainable market to low-income populations. So how are we articulating to the existing food programs? In the US recently, we have been experimenting with changes to WIC, to SNAP, and these other food programs, and we have shown an impact on health outcomes. We also need to market to institutional buyers, and then we're looking at innovative ideas for direct delivery to low-income populations. So for example, the federal government has just funded home visiting to low-income families. Can we actually connect baskets of foods to those home visitors? So.
Hold on to the mic, because I want to ask you, well, the question that really comes to mind is, I really follow you on what you're saying on the secondary benefits, and one obvious one that wasn't mentioned so far is the health benefit, because a population living in a food desert, I mean, you would probably see, I don't have the data, I'm not a scientist, but you would probably see higher incidence of cardiovascular disease and obesity. I mean, there are those kind of studies. But the question is really, how can you export your model, or are you thinking of exporting your model to Europe, or maybe to outside of the US in developing countries? Because there you really have a challenge, a cost challenge, because putting down like a mesh network or something is totally different in a slum than in the center of Boston.
That is an interesting question, and this is something we ITT get asked a lot, because ITT actually, this is the only domestic project we have. Generally, we only do work in the developing countries. I would say until we have some of these technological solutions, this is not an applicable model to the developing world because of, again, the infrastructure needs behind it. That said, I do know there are people in Kerala who are growing, feed for their cattle using hydroponic systems. There are people in Egypt who are doing rooftop gardens using hydroponics. So I think once we solve these problems for the developed world, we can figure out those nuggets of technology and how you can do a stripped-down system that might be applicable to farmers in other parts of the world. Because surely, I mean, in India, where we do a lot of our work, water and the disappearing access to water is a huge issue.
Thank you. And Nella, on to you. We've been talking about developing countries, but you're really on the ground there, so.
Alors, moi je vais parler en français. On
Allez-y.
va parler de, disons, de la production de riz en moyenne Casamance. Une production qui, dans l'image en fait pour la plateforme du SmartGrid, se trouve entre une chaîne traditionnelle, donc une production purement basée sur la tradition, mais pour des besoins de consommation du ménage. Donc à ce stade, en fait, c'est une production entièrement destinée au ménage pour le moment, qui n'est pas encore commercialisée, mais qui est entièrement faite par des femmes. Donc, pour ce qui est en fait de nos forces, de la force en fait de ce système, nous on intervient dans un programme qui appuie la production de riz local. Donc, ce système comme force, il est basé sur un processus avec des moyens basiques qui permettent en fait à nos interlocutrices, de comprendre ce qu'on essaye de leur dire à travers les techniques qu'on leur montre, mais on est obligé d'adopter une technicité en fait qu'elles sont capables de percevoir et d'accepter. C'est-à-dire que là, en fait, le résultat, les productrices de riz, elles le voient tout de suite et elles sont capables plus tard de le démultiplier à d'autres rizières avec leurs collègues productrices. Donc, à ce stade, on essaye tant bien que mal d'augmenter la production au fur et à mesure, mais on fait face de l'autre côté à quelques difficultés, c'est-à-dire que ce système, on n'arrive pas à avoir pour le moment en fait une structure pérenne qui est là, capable à la fin des programmes que nous sommes, qui sont là juste pour un temps bien précis, de pouvoir continuer l'action qui est en train de se faire et pouvoir, mettre à la disposition des femmes une assistance technique de proximité que nous, on est en train de leur donner pour le moment. Et en face de ces problèmes sociaux, on fait face aussi à des problèmes physiques parce qu'on fait face à une dégradation des terres, notamment à l'intrusion de la langue salée qui de plus en plus affecte les terres de production, mais aussi, à un manque d'aide de la part des hommes parce que c'est une production entièrement faite par les femmes. Donc à ce stade, c'est juste les femmes qui font le travail et qui font une certaine organisation par rapport à leur niveau d'interprétation des choses. Donc de l'autre côté, en termes d'opportunités, les programmes sont là, des programmes comme nous sont là. L'État est là, l'État investit dans le secteur, l'État et les bailleurs de fonds investissent dans le secteur. Et on a aussi, on est face à une tradition, en fait, à un contexte où traditionnellement on cultive du riz. Donc le savoir est là, même si en fait il manque une certaine technicité, mais le savoir il est là. Donc la connaissance, le savoir fait à tout ça, mais de l'autre côté, disons, c'est un savoir aussi qui se transfère de génération en génération. Et malheureusement, les productrices de riz, donc la main-d'œuvre qui produit ce riz est de plus en plus vieillissante. Et face à ce changement, c'est-à-dire face à cette augmentation, cet âge de la main-d'œuvre, les jeunes générations ne sont plus vraiment intéressées à investir ce secteur parce que tout simplement, c'est un travail de dur labeur et pour le moment, on n'a pas encore atteint un niveau de production qui puisse déboucher aux revenus. Donc, de ce fait, on essaye tant bien que mal avec, disons, différents conflits au niveau local de maintenir le système et à la limite, donc, dans le long terme, en fait, pour nous, c'est d'accéder en fait à un niveau de, disons, à une sécurité alimentaire, mais en plus de cette sécurité alimentaire, aussi à une sécurité économique, c'est-à-dire qu'on ait une valeur ajoutée, que ça soit plus seulement en fait quelque chose destiné pour la consommation du ménage, mais qu'on puisse en faire une activité génératrice de revenus, le riz. Donc de ce côté, pour la stratégie, c'est quoi pour nous? C'est de maintenir en fait un système de production qui est là, en essayant en fait de déboucher sur un marché. Donc autant les femmes auront accès aux intrants pour produire le riz, autant nous, en soutenant en fait cette production-là, on pourra accéder à un marché où le surplus sera commercialisé pour atteindre justement cette sécurité économique. Et pour nous, la seule clé, en fait, l'unique issue par rapport à cette activité, pour maintenir cette activité-là en vie, c'est vraiment en fait d'organiser les groupements de femmes, parce que pour le moment, on n'a pas de structure pérenne qui est là, donc l'unique issue pour nous, c'est de les organiser de sorte qu'elles soient capables, même si elles ont un appui technique, mais de continuer l'activité au fur et à mesure et d'augmenter leur production.
Well, merci. I'll ask you in English just for the sake of the audience. And, so what you were saying about women growers, that's really a great example of the collateral benefits we're talking about. So that's a social benefit, and I guess it gets structural because families, especially in Africa, are very women-centered. But I guess the question for us Europeans, for who hasn't been in Senegal or in Casamance, is what is really the importance there of rice? Because are you importers of rice? Is that, you were saying it's a traditional food product there?
Le Sénégal est un grand pays d'importateurs de riz. Donc, l'utilité, en fait, l'intérêt pour cette tradition-là de se perpétuer, c'est que pour une femme, c'est, disons, c'est une question d'honneur même d'amener du riz à la maison. Et encore du riz produit par une femme, c'est-à-dire c'est quelque chose qu'elle a, elle, c'est sa richesse. Donc, c'est sa part de contribution aussi dans le ménage, dans la famille. Donc, face à cela, en fait, le riz importé coûterait beaucoup plus cher si on ne l'avait pas subventionné. Et le riz qu'on est en train de produire, elles le produisent traditionnellement avec des moyens basiques. Donc, et elles ne récoltent d'ailleurs que quelque chose à hauteur de l'investissement. Donc, la plus importante part de cet investissement-là, c'est la main-d'œuvre. Et malheureusement, c'est la part qui souffre le plus dans ce système parce qu'elle vieillit.
D'accord. Merci, Bella. So back to Italy, Francesco Montesano, you come from Bari, and you're doing great work with this Biodiverso project on mapping our food our food varieties. So please explain us because the project, I understand, is not yet finished, but you already have data, and it's really interesting on the prospect of Italian consumption and production.
Sure, thank you very much. I was just to get back a little bit. When I first time heard about this vision of the smart grid for food system, it was about 1 year ago, and we were here in Seeds and Chips. Cecilia was looking for case studies, so involved us in thinking with her to how to make this innovative and disruptive concept into the reality. And I fixed into my mind some concepts like the need to enhance the local dimension of the food systems in order to create and allow a better match between the productive capacity and variety of a territory towards the needs of that territory, and also the need to better use technologies and new knowledge, and I would say knowledge in general, for a better production of food, to produce more nutritious food in a sustainable way. So aim to the protection of the resources, and also finally to put the human being at the center of the food system, which is probably something that nowadays is lacking. So I thought that we probably have this, we have many models which are already in progress toward a better food system, but I think that we have a specific case in which all these concepts interact very well. And so I want to talk to you about the role that the cultivation and the consumption of local varieties, so the cultivation of local vegetables, plays in a very, I would say, intensive region, horticultural region like Puglia region. So if we look at the statistics, we see that Puglia is the leading region in a leading country for the production of vegetables. And Puglia has been for 50 years the perfect stage of the so-called green revolution in agriculture. So we had a tremendous intensification of productivity of our lands, and this led us to become the leading region in Italy for the production of vegetables. This has to do, of course, also with the environment that we are so lucky to have. But I want to say also that the Mediterranean environment that did Puglia region rich in these terms is probably to become our threat for the future, because as you probably know, Mediterranean is an hotspot for climate change. So we definitely need to change to think for a change of paradigm in our agriculture. Anyway, although the Green Revolution implied a very narrowing stage for agro-biodiversity, and we experienced this also in Italy and in Puglia, I also have to say that in Puglia there is still a really strong interaction between the modern horticulture, so the use of the modern hybrid varieties, with the use of local and traditional varieties. So Puglia is still a coffer. It is an heritage of hundreds and hundreds of local vegetables and local varieties which are still in use. So I don't want to stress this point because it is already known. We know that the protection of agro-biodiversity is a key factor for the future. And agro-biodiversity means the interaction of the environment, but also of the genetic resources, so local varieties in this case, but also, very important, something that sometimes is neglected, the enhancement of the local knowledge, traditions and culture, which is part of agro-biodiversity. So in the last 3 years, ISPA CNR has been involved in the Biodiverso project, which is led by the University of Bari and granted by Regione Puglia. And basically during these years, we did a lot of research on our side in order to identify, characterize, and locate also the most promising local varieties. But we also have been in touch with stories, which is probably the most interesting part of the story. So stories that has to do with the relationship within the cultivation of local varieties and the preservation of our territories. But also the interaction between local varieties and our culture. Here is the case of the carota of Tigiano, called also carota of Saint Impazio, because in Puglia, very often the tradition has to do with faith. So this is a carrot which was traditionally cultivated just in a very little country, and it was consumed in occasion of the fest of this saint. But nowadays, these products are having a new life because everybody are getting in touch with the higher values of these products in terms, for instance, of nutritional value. So also the large supply retailer are knowing these products and are giving the right value to this to all these products. We got in touch also with stories of local varieties and the entrepreneurship, like for instance the case of this guy who has a really huge farm which is totally covered by local varieties of chicory. And again, the large supply retailer, in this case Coop, which is the biggest one in Italy, is giving support to those guys, and because the value of these local varieties is getting known by also common people. Entrepreneurship. This is a slide. This is a screenshot of a company in Puglia which is producing microgreens, so a very innovative food. Using local varieties from Puglia, so local varieties also to enhance entrepreneurship. And then nutritional value it is recognized at scientific level that new varieties have generally a lower nutritional value than the traditional ones. So in very conclusion, I think that we now have the tools to rewind and to get back to the future in order to fix the mistakes that have been unknowingly done in the last 50 years following the Green Revolution. So we don't have to get to the past. We have to, let's say, rewind and try to enhance, try to protect, to defend this enormous richness that we have in our territories because they are a key factor for the future food security. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Francesco. I think what you were saying about rewinding the future is very wise, and Italy has shown with the wine and other products to be able to do that. And with the beer, we're doing it. If you just tour the exhibit, you find many examples. I guess the question for you is, I mean, you have the carote, the carrots, which are wonderful, and you have many other things. But what about the other regions in Italy? Because is that something we can find across the country? Of course, you will say Puglia is the best and you have the most, but...
No, I will not. Yeah, okay, of course, the carrot was just an example. Just to give you a number, we, in the framework of this project, we have been able to identify about 300 local varieties of vegetables, but there are many, many more others. Most of them are just in the hands of seed saver growers, but many, as I showed you, have also a very big economic importance. So switching to Italy, I say that Italy, we know, is the country, it is recognized to be the country in Italy with the highest agrobiodiversity. We host more than half of the total species, talking about biodiversity, European biodiversity in general. So for sure, this is a richness that natures and our also old people gave us. So we have definitely to use these resources. We took the risk in the last 50 years to lose it. Think that in the US it is estimated that more than 90% of local varieties have been lost forever. So we still have this richness. Of course, we lost a lot, but we have this richness. And Italy is the leading country. We have a richness that we definitely need to use. And to do this, we need to act on the seed industry because we need to protect the seeds. We need to act on marketing. We need to act on consumers. We need to act on the growing techniques. But there is much that we are doing, and we will do for sure much more in the future.
Thank you. So good luck, and looking forward to hear about your final results later this year. Mauro Cordioli, Easy Lab. So what is a startup doing in all of this?
Time for a word. Some for word. I work in the R&D, research and development of Digital Lab, a startup specialized in smart food solutions. AgriOpen Data is our software platform that collects and distributes information on agricultural processes for traceability, provenance control, and for certification of agricultural products. We are a small team ranging from research and development and sales marketing area. But what is our starting point? Today, one issue for farmers is managing in real time the information coming from different sources. They have to collect data from related to pesticide use, field sensors, water resource management, and they also have to collect information coming from IoT devices and drone. All that are in order to make a correct decision on the field operation and offer this information back for needed documentation and legal compliance, certification, or resource management as for water consumption, sustainability, traceability of agricultural products, and to share all this data along the supply chain. So which is our mission? We offer a platform that in real time collect data, track this data, and distribute back this data coming from field sensor, weather station, IoT-enabled devices, along with treatment applied and economical operation made by farmers. Such information are automatically integrated into the platform and organized with the support of public open data coming from multiple sources. We distribute back this information by World Wide Web or by a single specific application or by automatic bots on social network like Telegram. So we can also product all those reports and share the data as big data sources for other uses. But traceability is one of main pillars of our platform. And the technological core of that system is the blockchain smart contract technology. A little definition, the blockchain is a form of distributed database that maintains a continuously growing linked list of records, called blocks, secured from tampering by cryptographic technique, so that the blockchain are resistant to alteration of the data. The blockchain is also a peer-to-peer network without a central authority, so it is distributed from the nodes that, without a single controller. We use blockchain as a resilient distributed ledger that can record transactions between parties of the food chain, or the data produced by one single actor of the food chain or the food system in a verifiable and permanent way, so that the smart contracts are able to control, rule in an automatic and secure way the flow of information between the involved nodes, allowing third parties as consumer or certification authorities to verify the data produced. Thanks to the blockchain based system, AgriOpen Data aims to support and improve the full chain, creating trust between the involved parties, guaranteeing transparency and safety to the final consumer by certifying each step of the agri-food chain, from the origin, the product, to its transformation, up to the distribution to the large-scale retailer. As a use case, a particular use case, we have developed in joint effort with Ernst Young a platform for the white production of Bianco Falanghina di Puglia, allowing the final consumer using a QR code to track down the bottle history recorded in the blockchain in terms of geographical context, cultivation, winemaking processes, and distribution and environmental impact. We can account the water used for the production of a single bottle of wine, for example. So, using a distributed system based on smart contracts on the blockchain, we have embraced the concept of resilient smart grids in order to manage farm production in a more sustainable way, increasing the food safety. So we are placing in the innovating chain area of the scheme. So that the transaction can be accounted in a transparent manner. Data is checked by correlating different sources to increase the trust between all the parties of the actor of the food grid, preventing moral hazard that can happen in some situation. Using this architecture, we are also trying to start up a challenging project in collaboration with a non-profit organization, Pool, that aims to help some African farmers to gain better value from their products when they came here in Europe. I hope.
Thank you,
Thank
Mauro. One quick question while our friends prepare the connection with Mediconet, if she's already online. But in the meantime, what I wanted to ask you is like, you spoke about developing countries. What about Italy? What can we do to have it now here efficient? Do you need more data, more policies, more regulation?
We need the cutoff. We need essentially more open data from coming from the agricultural sector,
okay.
food. Open data is a key to automate the process.
Ok, thank you. Possiamo avere la connessione con Marie Connect? Hello, Marie. Hi.
Buongiorno.
Buongiorno. Are you doing this in Italian or in English?
English.
Okay. Please go ahead. So I don't know if you were able to follow us, but we covered several aspects from food deserts to the more techie side. And I guess your part is important because it's about really making this happen with this scientific discovery and intellectual protection, right? So please go ahead.
Okay, I'm glad to join you today from Global Good, which is a fund that has been financed by Bill Gates specifically in order to seek impact in health and development by enabling improvements aimed at food security with smallholder farm value chains, particularly in Africa and Southeast Asia. And we work on technologies that are cost appropriate for low resource environments. It's important that we look for systems that are already partially functioning and identify gaps in those systems in order to develop our technologies to align with incentives of existing markets. We feel that that's the most important way of leveraging the ability of the existing markets to work with us. So in particular, we're doing a lot of work related to livestock. Next slide. Thank you. We understand that a number of philanthropy organizations, government aid organizations, the private sector has attempted to provide assistance for nutrition and for poverty alleviation in developing countries by improved inputs such as seeds, pumps, fertilizers, and so on. In general, these have very little sustained uptake because there's not a way for allowing the integration of these inputs into a wider system. So next slide. However, if there's alignment with some sort of a consumer of the food that is being produced, like a processor, for example, a dairy processor that's making cheeses or yogurts or milk powder, that processor is purchasing produce from the system and therefore is pulling the farmers to produce, and the farmers are then purchasing inputs or obtaining inputs in order to make their production, in order to raise their incomes, in order to provide for the outputs as well as feeding their own families. And so there's a pull through the system, and it becomes more sustainable that a variety of improved inputs are provided. Next slide. So in particular, we're emphasizing milk as an important leverage point for a number of developing country economies where nutrition and poverty alleviation aims are in sight. Many crops, vegetables, for example, have been mentioned, rice, they're very important for nutrition, but they only are produced at certain times of year, whereas milk can be an important source of protein and income throughout the year. Also, in many of the target countries, keeping cattle is a really important part of the culture. Many households already have access to a cow. And so if there were improvements in the milk system for obtaining income, then less spoilage could result. But milk being transported to markets and customers, often without refrigeration, does tend to spoil. And this results in the fact that processors in many developing countries don't actually buy any local milk. They choose to import milk powder for their products rather than buying it locally. So we felt that a really important leverage point is to design ways of informing farmers about how to reduce the bacterial loads in the milk prior to transport, so that even without refrigeration, there's less spoilage. It's also less likely to negatively affect the health of the animals if the farmers are conscious of the contributors to bacterial load. Next slide. So raw milk in low resource settings often contains very high bacterial loads. And our vision is to design a technology that benefits producers by giving them very rapid information about the bacterial load. So we're designing a paper-based assay. It's a little bit like litmus paper, except that it will be allowing timely feedback to the farmer, specifically about bacterial contamination. And that would allow, if the farmers have information about the bacteria in the milk that they are producing, that would allow processors also to have more information. It would allow the farmers to correct conditions that are resulting in high contamination and enable the processors to count on the farmers being able to do that, so they're more likely to purchase from the farmers. And we do have undertakings from a number of processors that they're interested in doing exactly that. Next slide. So there are if bacteria is reduced, then rapid feedback testing can lead to processing of milk into higher value products and products that have longer shelf life, products that are more nutritious. It's also a reduction in mastitis. So it's a reduction in the farmers choosing to purchase antibiotics, which is a cost for them. Some of the bacteria are pathogens, and so reduction of human illness as well as reduction of the lifetime productivity of the animal is a significant goal in this work. Next slide. But the technologies that currently exist for measuring bacteria in milk are not at all appropriate for low resource settings. They offer no leverage at all in these settings. The techniques that are available are either very, very slow or too insensitive or too expensive to deploy. Next slide. So we're developing, as I say, a sort of a colorimetric test that will detect levels of contamination of bacteria in the milk. It does this in the presence of milk that is raw or pasteurized, whether it's been spoiled or not, whether it's been boiled or treated in various ways. Next slide. And most importantly, we've developed it with a number of aspects of leverage of the SmartGrid idea in low resource systems in mind. It's fast, it's reliable in the presence of a variety of different kinds of bacteria. It takes minimal steps. It doesn't need a reader that requires electricity. It doesn't require skilled labor or instrumentation. And all of the technologies that we develop must meet these same kinds of criteria in order to allow for leverage in low resource settings. Next slide. We're in the process of developing a similar kind of technology for rapid feedback to producers so that they are able to um, understand how to meet the needs of processors with quick feedback, cheaply, inexpensively, without a lot of training, without a lot of instrumentation. Also for grain markets, that includes maize, rice, and so on. These technologies are, we think, important leverage sources for making the strong connections between producers and consumers. Next slide. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Marie. Thank you, Marie. That was very nice, very, very interesting. I have just one quick question because we're all also running on time here. But these are low-cost technologies that, are, of course, are very interesting for countries where you have tropical countries where you don't have a cold chain in place. But is there a chance for them to feed back into the developed world? Because that would be a major innovation if you can just have a color test to see how good your milk is. That's a quick and cheap way of doing it.
Yes, yes, we believe that making technology appropriate for low resource settings also results often in good innovations that are enabling even in situations where there are more resources available. The things that we're trying to do are appropriate for human beings to be able to get rapid feedback about the things that human beings are trying to grow for food. And so that's going to be, I think, true and helpful anywhere. The value chains that we focused on are some of the most important in the developing world. Some other kinds of value chains may be more important in other places, but the principle of rapid feedback between the producers and the purchasers is that we think a pretty universal principle for giving leverage to the producers.
Thank you, Marie. We're doing a bit of a tour of the world here, so we're going to Indonesia now. So Madi, you're based in Bali, and that's you're not working with the tourism industry, but the tourism industry is a relevant part of your job because you're actually working to provide the Balinese, but also the tourists, because you have what, 4 or 5 million Balinese and another 7 million tourists that come there every year. So you have a lot of people to feed. How do you do that?
Okay, thank you. Tourism and agriculture during the last decades in Bali is always become hot issues and hot debates, by the Balinese people, because most of Balinese, they don't feel that tourism give a significant contribution, significant benefit for the people of the Bali, especially for the small-scale agriculture. I'm glad to share one of the case study I've been done in Bali, figuring about the tourism challenge on small-scale agribusiness in Bali. I took this case study in the Bedugul area, where is famous with vegetable production in Bali. Okay, if we look at the data, about the tourism in Bali, during the last decade, there's a significant development. So by up to 2016, the tourists coming to Bali, 12.8 million. If we compare then the population of Bali, I mean the inhabitants of Bali only 4.9, so almost triple if we comparing then the population of Bali. So because of the significant development of tourism, you can imagine that there are many hotels, star hotel, non-star hotels, the flow like mushroom, and also restaurant. So the consequences of tourism, there's dynamic movement of people is very significant to Bali. Not only tourists, also people from outside of Bali, I mean other island of Indonesia also move to Bali. in the island of Bali also significant movement of, that people from the village to the city. That's we have to consider for the future. And because of the tourism, we need more land, we need more labor, so we need more food and water to feed the people coming to Bali. And there's a significant change if we look at the data from the Bureau of Statistics in Bali. There's a significant conversion of agricultural land to the non-agricultural land. So every year, I've got the data that 3,617 hectares every year the agricultural land shift to the non-agricultural purposes. So there's change of lifestyle, there's consumer habits also for the Balinese people, and the cost of living also increases. Is there any opportunity for the agriculture? Yes, there are opportunities. Increase of market demand, more alternative market and value crop, encourage farmer to become more productive. But the response of the farmers is so exaggerated because most of the farmer now cling with the hybrid crop. So the hybrid crop dominated now the land of the Bedugul. And yeah, the farmer is really flexible to choose what the crop they have to cultivate it. And more than one species, normally one of the family farm grows, the crops. And the problem is, because of the significant response of the farmers in the Bedugul area, there is intensive use of agrochemical. My study indicates that most of the land in the Bedugul now polluted by heavy metals. Loss of local variety, so the biodiversity decreases, and inefficient and ineffective agribusiness supply chains because less value-oriented. So this is my study. When look at the distribution channel of vegetable from Bedugul, there are 5 distribution channels. So from the analysis that have been done, the channel 1, 2, and 3 are less value-oriented, and channel 4 and 5 more value-oriented, but still need to be improved because the interaction, the integrated management to create the values not so strong. So that's why my conclusion that agribusiness system still inefficient and ineffective to face the dynamic change in the modern market and institutional consumers. So there's a future development and improvement that we have to be done. So that I've been doing also by up to now and for the future. Improving the efficiency and the effectiveness of the existing agribusiness system by strengthening and developing strong integrated value chain systems. And eco-friendly production and safe biodiversity, also cultural values, increase income to improve quality of life. This is the picture, one of the model of the value chain that we create now, and hopefully that's working well until now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mehdi. Again, for you, I guess, one of the questions there is, Bali is Bali, but that's an area of the world where probably you have similar problems in other areas. I would say Thailand has a big tourist flow, or Vietnam. Is that something that is your approach exportable to those areas too?
Okay, I've been to Thailand, Malaysia, and Philippines also. It has the same problems. I believe that the country like Myanmar, Cambodia, and Vietnam, it will be facing the same problems because of the growing of the tourism. It's not only the case of the growing of tourism only, because the movement of the people now in the global era is so significant. So it will be happen in different places in the world. You know, how come the small-scale farmers, has to be improved, facing the significant change in the consumer side that's happened also in the whole world. Thank you.
Yes, I follow you on that because the urbanization, I mean, we have more than half the world population is living in cities, and it's getting even always more concentrated. So I guess, yeah, we'll see more of that. Natalia, last but not least, you're closing. We're closing our world tour in Mexico here. So we're back to one of the main foodstuffs, corn, maize, and you're working in Mexico and not only. So.
Yeah, thank you. So yes, we are working in Mexico. We are part of an international agriculture center that do research, agricultural research for development to ensure food security, but also food nutrition. So we are going beyond productivity, and we are tackling the issues of food security, food nutrition. And one of the aspects is not only at the production of the crop, but also at the processing methods. There are several methods that increase the nutrition of the food products, and we are working on one that is actually, it was developed several years ago by the Aztecs in the pre-Hispanic time, and it's called nixtamalization. The word is strange, but it's actually a lime cooking process. We put the grains of maize in water with lime or calcium hydroxide, and it is being cooked overnight. I mean, it's cooked for 30 minutes, more or less. It's steeped overnight, and the day after, the grains are washed and processed, are converted in a dough that is actually being converted to several food products, especially the tortillas that we use for the well-known tacos. But a part of the tortillas, out of this dough, in Mexico and Central America, this dough is converted also for more than 300 different food products. The beauty of this traditional processing method called nixtamalization is that it brings a lot of nutritional benefits to the food products as well as socioeconomic benefits these days. What can we talk about nutritional benefits? Well, it reduces the risk of diseases like pellagra, increase the calcium intake of the population, and actually nixtamalization and the tortillas itself are being considered in Mexico like the cow of Mexicans, especially the poor communities, because the intake of calcium is increased when we consume the tortillas. It also provides sources of dietary fiber, and last but not least, and it's an area that is still to be explored in deep detail, it helps to reduce the presence of mycotoxin, which are toxins that are produced by fungi that grow not only during the post-harvest storage, but also during the crop itself. And among the socioeconomic benefits, we can talk about the shelf life. Oh God. The shelf life of the products is actually prolonged. It brings income opportunities, not only in Mexico, but in Central America, when women and youth and young generations can sell the products on the streets, and it can also increase the market opportunities for the people. However, the maize was taken from Mexico, which is the center of origin of this crop, to around the world, especially to Africa, by the Portuguese, but the Portuguese forgot to take the luggage with this nixtamalization technology. So when you go to Africa, and especially countries in Eastern Africa and Southern Africa, like Kenya, there are very few products out of maize. So while in Mexico we have more than 600 food products derived by maize, and 300 of them derived from nixtamalization, in Kenya they only have less than 10 food different products. Mainly is the porridge that they consume and is boiled or roasted green maize. So it is a very big opportunity to introduce different food forms to consume the maize in other countries. And well, you may ask, well, it is really important or it is really feasible to transfer this technology. It's like a south-to-south collaboration. And why to Kenya? Well, one of the, some of the reasons are that maize is still a staple crop in Kenya, and the consumption per capita is more than 100 kg per year. As I mentioned, there are limited maize-based food products in this country, and there is a big increase of post-harvest losses due to the mycotoxin contamination. And nixtamalization could be a way to reduce this issue. So we are working on this SmartGrid concept, trying to match the supply to the needs, taking in account the cultural background, the preference of the local people for food products, and optimize the resources that are available. Fortunately, in countries like Kenya, maize is available, lime is available, the calcium hydroxide, and water is available, although there is a challenge in that area that I will mention in the next slide. Well, so taking this SmartGrid concept, what we are doing is linking the different actors of the chain, the maize chain, maize farmers, processors, and consumers, adapting the technologies to the resources, the local resources, connecting capacities and needs, and monitoring and evaluating the supply chain data. And in that way, we are hoping to establish this type of technology to bring not only food safety, but also food nutrition to the countries. As I mentioned, of course, there are challenges. Not everything is easy in life, but we are in the position to try to tackle those challenges in collaboration, public and private collaboration, and also working in the SmartGrid platform, trying to link not only this traditional chain, but the interregional needs, emerging chains, etc., where we can actually take the best out of the different capacities that are around and ensure that nixtamalization not only brings economic opportunities to the local people, to the new urban population, but also food safety, food nutrition, and food security to the rural populations in those countries. Thank you.
Thank you, Natalia. One quick question, because we're running out of time, and I want to leave a few minutes to Cecilia to close up this wonderful panel. But when you're saying 600 products, of course, we look forward to see the Kenyan tortilla and tacos. But I'm wondering, are you transferring also processing techniques and recipes? Because I mean, you can't, as you said, you just can't give the technology or the seeds and have the production there.
Yeah, along with the processing technology, we are adapting the local preference for food products to use to consume nixtamalized kernels. So we ensure that the nutrition is present there, but we respect the culture and the local uses of maize. So that's part of the process. So it's we will adapt the recipes to the local people.
It's a Mexican invasion in Africa. I didn't hear that one. I didn't see that one coming in. Cecilia, please close it up. Congratulations again for this wonderful panel, this wonderful lineup. You and Giorgio now, they did a great job with this.
Well, after this world tour, as you were just pointing out, I hope that you have at least a little bit a better idea of the SmartGrid concept would like to be. As I say, in 25, 30 years from now, we don't think that we can do it in the next 2 or 3 years. But we need the technology that Mauro can provide for us and other people like him. That's high innovative technology, but we also need, simple technologies like the ones that Natalia or the ones that Marie were showing us. We need to adapt it to different situations, and we want to, as I say, tackle processes in this way and hope to address challenges like bringing food in food deserts, supporting biodiversity, helping out against climate change, and adapt also to social situations like the ones that Mare was proposing to us, or also, migration, which is also another point that we have to address in the future. So it's supposed to be a very, very adaptable grid that we hope could be a way of changing the processes and maybe changing some of the paradigms in which we are stuck nowadays and which we know are not going to help us solve some very, very important issues like sustainability, food security, and climate change and others. So thank you very much for your attention, and thank you to all the colleagues who provided these wonderful case studies.
Thank you again. And well, enjoy the rest of the conference. I guess we're free to go. Our speakers are in the room, so if you want to approach them, you're all welcome. Thank you again, guys.
And thank you.
Il pubblico c'è.